So the other big news this week, actually a positive piece of news, was the announcement, or again the leak, that there's going to be, there is a criminal investigation of Brennan, the former CIA director under Obama, and James Comey for alleged perjury and conspiracy. I don't know if that includes Comey as well in terms of the directed charges or potential crimes, but they're trying to investigate them over, it looks like, their role in the Russia hoax, abuse of power, targeting Trump. And the question is, did they lie under oath, or conspire to lie, conspiracy to commit perjury or something like that, in a way that would require prosecution? And the reason this issue has popped up again is because John Ratcliffe, who is the CIA director appointed by President Trump, directed an analysis of what is called an intelligence community assessment that the Obama gang started up to undermine President Trump. And the assessment, which is supposed to be top secret, was almost immediately leaked as soon as it was created, and it generated a lot of news because it provided a hook based on the false allegation that Putin wanted to get Trump elected, and they had this dossier that showed that Trump was on the hook with the Russians. It was the Russiagate smear, the Steele dossier smear, that they used to try to destroy Trump. And Brennan's testimony about that and his role in this is being criminally investigated, it looks like, and maybe Comey's as well. Now, separately, I still don't know why Comey hasn't been arrested yet for threatening or promoting the murder of Trump online. But that's another matter. So in this CIA note, which I encourage you all to read, because I by the way, take it with a grain of salt, because it's the CIA covering its you-know-what in this document. Brennan isn't around anymore, William Brennan isn't around anymore, so they can diss him, but they're going to protect the institution. So essentially what they say is this intelligence community assessment into Russia's foreign interference was compromised by Brennan and the leadership of the FBI and the White House, etc., forcing the use of the Steele dossier, which was garbage, as a basis to suggest that Putin aspired to get Trump elected. I'm summarizing the document. I'll get some into detail. And there was really no basis for that other than the fake dossier. And in fact, there was other bases to suggest, which I thought was much more plausible at the time, that the Russians wanted to see Hillary reelected, or elected, excuse me, and that efforts to interfere in our elections were designed to undermine Hillary if she were president. But that didn't comport with what the goal of the Obama gang was. Obama did it. I just want you to remember, Obama did it. He directed this fake document that I'm referencing here be produced. The review identified multiple procedural anomalies in the preparation of the ICA, the Intelligence Community Assessment. I guess I should bring it up now so you can see some of it at least. Let me see here. Yes, I'm starting to read from the bottom here. The DIA review identified multiple procedural anomalies in the preparation of the ICA, These included a highly compressed production timeline, stringent compartmentation, and excessive involvement of agency heads, all of which led to the departures from standard practices in the drafting, coordination, and reviewing of the ICA. These departures impeded efforts to apply rigorous tradecraft, particularly to the assessment's most contentious judgment, which was that Putin aspired to get Trump to become president. It was false. And here's some sections I thought worth sharing with you. I encourage you to read the entire document, which we'll link below. This is on page 3. A DNI report in 2017 indicated that the highest classified version of the ICA had been shared with more than 200 U.S. officials. That's a way to guarantee it gets leaked. This is unusually high for such a highly compartmented product, and calls into question whether the extreme limitations on access to underlying intelligence within the IC during the ICA's preparation was justifiable. So what they're saying is, we couldn't look at a lot of the so-called evidence that was being used to justify this crap, yet then they share it with 200 people as if it was even though supposedly it was one of the most top secret documents in the government. You know what they were doing. And then Brennan was trying to rig it. One business day before IC analysts convened for the only coordination session on the ICA, Brennan sent a note to the CIA workforce stating he had met with the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, and FBI Director. I think Clapper was Director of National Intelligence at the time. Is that right, guys? And then Comey was the FBI Director. And that there is strong consensus among us on the scope, nature, and intent of Russian interference. There you go. They already knew before they even wrote the report what it was going to say. They wired it. While officers involved in drafting the ICA consistently said they did not feel pressured to reach specific conclusions, Brennan's premature signaling that agency heads had already reached consensus before the ICA was even coordinated risked stifling analysis debate. Of course it did. It's rigged it. I don't care what they said. They didn't feel pressure. Their bosses said, we already know what the conclusion's going to be. Do you think they're going to put their heads on a block and conclude otherwise? The decision, right under that block, by agency heads to include the Steele dossier in the ICA ran counter to fundamental tradecraft principles and ultimately undermined the credibility of a key judgment. What does tradecraft mean? It generally means the kind of rigorous process through which an intelligence agency, officer, entity collects information to ascertain its credibility, its where it came from, who, let's say a source or sources say, this happened. Well, what's the source interest in saying it? Who else might have an interest in pushing that with us? How is it we are sure that we're not being played? All sorts of things have to be in place in order for something to be validated as being in line with tradecraft principles. The ICA authors first learned of the dossier and FBI's leadership's insistence on its inclusion on 20 December, the same day the largely coordinated draft was entering the review process at CIA. FBI leadership made it clear that their participation in the ICA hinged on the dossier's inclusion, and over the next few days repeatedly pushed the weave references to it throughout the main body of the ICA. So remember what the dossier was. It was a joint series of memos, or a series of memos jointly funded by the Clinton campaign in partnership with the FBI. Christopher Steele was the individual who was managing the creation of this information, and it was full of malicious smears, half-truths, no truths, falsehoods about President Trump and Russia. I'm not even going to bore you with the details of how wrong it was. But it became the fundamental basis for this ICA. James Comey insisted it be put in there. His buddy Brennan said, sure thing. And it was rigged. And it was used to justify the attempted destruction of President Trump for 4 years by Mueller through impeachment and all the rest. And here's the part where the key thing was the key judgment, which was false, that Putin aspired to put Trump in office was false and elevated among other more likely judgments. In one instance, the authors cited part of a credibly sourced report that supported the high confidence assessment on the first two goals of the Putin directed campaign: undermining U.S. democratic processes generally, right, and denigrating Clinton, but omitted information that conflicted with the aspired judgment, meaning Putin aspired to put Trump in. The omitted information, as well as a small body of other credibly sourced reporting that was also not cited in the ICA, suggests that Putin was more ambivalent about which candidate won the election. So they withheld evidence and manipulated the placement of evidence in this intelligence community assessment that was used to destroy Trump and justify criminal investigations and the destruction of him and his family and countless others. And by the way, none of this is new. I remember making these observations initially when they said Putin wanted Trump to win. I was like, what was the basis for that? There was no basis. I remember reading the ICA because it was leaked immediately to try to destroy Trump even before he got into office. It was used to push out the Steele dossier, that smear operation. Eventually led to the destruction of General Flynn's career at the time and countless others. And it was quite obvious that to the degree the Russians were interested in our politics, it was because they thought Hillary was going to win, like everyone else in the country practically. Do you think the Russians knew that Trump was going to win? No, they were following what everyone else was thinking. I didn't think Trump was necessarily going to win. The odds were he was not going to win. It was a surprise. And for them to pretend that Putin was rooting for the underdog when Hillary was on his payroll, practically speaking, is absurd. These are a bunch of criminals. I'm not going to read any more of this garbage. You know why the rest of it's garbage? Because then they kind of highlight how Brennan manipulated the ICA, but then they say, oh, by the way, generally our product otherwise was perfect, which of course is ridiculous. The CIA had it in for Trump as much as anyone else did. Not only with this ICA specifically, this fake report or assessment they put out, but generally speaking. It was an intel operation against Trump. It involved the CIA. And now Brennan's under criminal investigation. Now people say, well, Brennan being under criminal investigation and Comey being under criminal investigation over these issues was a way to distract from the bad news and the disruption over the Epstein fiasco. Maybe. I don't rule it out. but it's better than nothing. But I have to tell you, I don't trust the FBI to investigate this. I don't trust the Justice Department to investigate this. And remember, this is just one aspect of the whole lawfare against Trump. What about what they did to Trump the last 4 years? Trying to jail him for disputing the 2020 election. Trying to get him killed, literally trying to get him killed by depriving him of needed Secret Service protection. We're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of Butler, and there's been zero accountability, practically speaking. Oh yeah, some Secret Service agents were reassigned or suspended for a few weeks. That's it. No one's fired. No one's being seriously investigated for withholding Secret Service protection and assets from Trump. So forgive me for still being very, very skeptical of these agencies. I've made the point once, and I will make it again. No matter the issue, President Trump should, when it comes to these big political cases that touch on politics because of who the potential targets are, he should be running the show. He shouldn't rely on the Justice Department to investigate the Justice Department, the Secret Service to investigate the Secret Service, the FBI to investigate the FBI. He should pick his own people who report directly to him to run any criminal investigations or potential prosecutions. He is the chief magistrate, and that's what he should do. I mean, look at the conflagration between Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino now. Do you think those agencies, as they're currently run, even if they wanted to, could run a complex investigation or serious criminal investigation, not only of people like Joe Biden and his gang, their family, you name it, what needs to be investigated, but also the role of their own agencies in this criminality? They're conflicted and compromised. And it's not a criticism of them, it's an observation. The agencies are conflicted and compromised. Let's say they're all great people over there, but they can't investigate themselves, especially if there are other ways to do it other than the FBI or Justice Department, because others can do it. The president can empower them. So, I don't know what the Justice Department's doing, but I know what Judicial Watch is doing. Schiff. He's one of the worst. I talked about him last week, and there's a really simple criminal case that potentially could be brought against him on mortgage fraud, and it's worth highlighting again because he's not just a loser congressman. Not that they're losers, but you know what I mean. He's not just one of 435 House members. He's a senator from California now, and I talked about his corruption on his buying his own homes and potential fraud with Eric Bolin on Real America's Voice News.
Do you trust Adam Schiff? And he says he doesn't, and he says Adam has a terrible ethics record, calls him an abuser and a liar. Let's welcome the president of Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton. Really good to have you on, Tom. And how about Adam Schiff there? Guilty of some of the things that he was trying to nail Trump with in impeachments 1.0, 2.0, and who knows, in between the two presidencies. What's going on with Maryland man Schiff?
Well, besides his lying about Russia and abusing his office to target people he doesn't like politically, secretly subpoenaing phone records, for example, and then leaking the contents. On top of that, there's credible evidence he committed mortgage fraud. It's quite simple. When you apply for a mortgage, you're supposed to declare whether the property is your primary residence or not. And you can't have two primary residences. And he cited that he had two primary residences falsely, it looks like, according to the records, 3, 4, 5 times on various loan applications. And that's potentially a federal crime. But he can complain all he wants about being targeted and such. It's a readily apparent crime, and this is the same man who happily celebrated President Trump getting arrested not once, not twice, but 4 times for based on the political lawfare targeting him. Here, it's pretty clear he was playing games, and he deserves, in the least, a serious criminal investigation, if not more.
What do you think, Tom? Again, I ask this to every guest who we talk about. Do you think we will eventually see a perp walk for some of these people? By the way, we're watching Trump come down the stairs here. He's approaching a podium. So I apologize, Tom, if I cut you off, but will we see a perp walk?
I don't know. I think there will be figures involved in the abuse of Trump who will eventually be prosecuted. Will it be sufficient? Probably not, but there'll be some who are targeted.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with Schiff, but on top of the criminal investigation potentially against him, the Senate should commence an ethics investigation as well, and there's nothing precluding the Senate from doing so. So I think we'll be pressuring the Senate to do that as well. Just before I came out, Tulsi Gabbard, who is the Office of Director of National Intelligence, runs that office, released and declassified information about the Russiagate smears of Trump. And the documents show that the Obama gang and Comey's FBI and CIA and the deep state intelligence agencies basically rushed through a process to create the fake news that the Russians wanted Trump to win. And what Tulsi's report or information shows is that what had happened was the initial report was the Russians didn't and couldn't interfere with our elections. They may have wanted to, but they wouldn't have had much impact. Certainly, they couldn't access our systems in a way to change the elections. But that wasn't what the Obama gang wanted. They wanted to smear Trump. And the documents show that they threw out, essentially, the document that was relatively straightforward because it didn't help their seditious, treacherous agenda, and they concocted another one, which was Russia, Russia, Russia. And we talked about this last week, where they laundered the Steele dossier through this subsequent analysis. The Steele dossier was the fake garbage created by the Clinton campaign, paid for in partnership with the FBI to smear Trump and to use it to undermine his administration and try to get him thrown in jail. And so the details of this document are really incredible. So Tulsi posted a series of tweets that are very effective in describing what the issues are about. So let's go through it one by one because it's worth the time, because the media is not going to tell you about this, but I will. The creation of the Russia hoax, as I described, real intel assessment, Russia and criminal actors did not impact recent U.S. election results by conducting cyber attacks on infrastructure. As I noted, that was the initial conclusion. Okay, so, and that happened shortly before Trump won. This was around September of 2016. Trump wins. They have a Obama gang meeting with Obama in the White House on December 9th, and they literally meet to plan the Russia hoax. So Obama ordered a new investigation or new summary of the fake information there on the right. IC begins outlining new assessment to claim election was hacked. And the day before, you know how we know something happened? The day before, on December 8th, the IC pulled the product about how the Russians didn't do anything at the requests of the FBI. So they create this intelligence assessment that's fake. They immediately start leaking it and essentially weaponize it in order to undermine and destroy the Trump administration. So this was the initial consensus. We are working with CIA on a presidential daily brief submission on the threat. The thrust of the analysis is that there is no indication of a Russian threat to directly manipulate the actual vote count. Later on, September 9th, we agree with Russia probably, and this is the line they agree with that was going to be in the presidential daily brief. Russia probably is not and will not trying to influence the election by using cyber means to manipulate computer-enabled election infrastructure. And then Clapper talking points. We assess this is just before that infamous meeting with Obama. We assess that foreign adversaries did not use cyber attacks on election infrastructure to alter the U.S. presidential election outcome this year. We have no evidence of cyber manipulation or election infrastructure intended to alter results. So they go down. Let's go down to the next one. They pulled the brief. This is what it was to say before it was pulled. Russian and criminal actors did not impact recent election results by conducting malicious cyber activities against election infrastructure. Okay, and there you have this is the smoking gun. Based on some new guidance, we're going to push back publication of the presidential daily brief. It will not run tomorrow and is not likely to run until next week. And the next day, as Tulsi highlights, Brennan, Clapper, all the rest met at this secret meeting. So look at the gang that's there. The participants include Susan Rice. Biden was asleep, I guess. He wasn't there. John Kerry, Victoria Nuland, Adam Schiff from Treasury, Loretta Lynch, Justice Department, Mary McCord, Justice Department, Jay Johnson, top DHS official, the chief of staff at the time, Dennis McDonough, Neil Eggleston, who was type White House counsel, top lawyer, Andrew McCabe for the FBI, the corrupt Andrew McCabe, the corrupt John Brennan for the CIA, etc. Ben Rhodes. The IC is prepared to produce an assessment per the president's request. So Obama got the operation going to get Trump. Let's go down to the next tweet. And this was the fake news reports. Though Russia has long conducted cyber spying on U.S. agencies, companies, and organizations, this presidential campaign marks the first time Russia has attempted through cyber means to interfere in, if not actively influence, the outcome of the election. Completely opposite to what they said before. It was all made up. It all began leaking immediately after the meeting and contemporaneous with it. Let's go to the next one. And of course, they used the Steele dossier. And someone said, why did we use the Steele dossier? That's essentially what that email says. The Steele dossier was a factor in the Obama intelligence assessment. So they used this fake dossier to try to destroy President Trump. I mean, this is important. And there's enough here, given the various testimonies and the conspiracy that I think continues to this day, to warrant a fulsome criminal investigation. And I'm pleased the agencies are releasing this info, but this can't be the end of it. We got to go to the punishment phase, the accountability phase for the warfare against Trump. And I found something very interesting in the documents that we uncovered here, or that were produced. Of course, we had asked for records like this many, many times. So you can be sure our pressure helped get some of these records out. This is from a FBI analyst. Listen to this paragraph. See, it's from the blacked out name, Intelligence Analyst, Technology, Cyber Intelligence Unit, Cyber Intelligence section. And so let's look at number 2 there. We believe it is worth noting that in an extremely close race, it is certainly possible that a very targeted cyber attack aimed at manipulating votes could lead to a change in the legitimate results and affect the outcome of the election. As an example, the votes in a swing county in a swing state could potentially be slightly altered, thus resulting in the electoral college votes of a particular state to go toward one particular individual, thus tipping the entire election in their favor. i.e., in the 2000 election, the results in Florida essentially were decided by 1 or 2 counties. Although this is unlikely, it certainly remains a possibility, and one that can't be discounted due to the high impact, even with the disjointed nature of U.S. electing technology. So here we have, just before the 2016 election, an FBI intelligence analyst sharing with other top officials in the United States government that, yes, our election systems are subject to potential hacking by foreign actors in a way that can affect the outcome of the election. And it seemingly is easy to do. You don't need to do it nationally. All you need to do, go into a select county or select state, and you can get it done. Now, if you made that allegation, as you recall, around 2020, you were sued, you were disbarred, you were targeted for censorship, you were threatened with jail. In fact, you probably you could go to jail already if it weren't for the election changing the leadership of the Justice Department. So these people in 2016 acknowledged that our election systems are susceptible to being hacked. And if we said the same thing in 2020, or even asked the question, or expressed concern about it, they tried to jail and destroy you. Yeah, so I'm ticked off about this Russia stuff. But we already knew that they had been doing this in large measure. This is more proof beyond a shadow of a doubt. I have no doubt. But this is really outrageous here. It shows you how dishonest our whole system is, isn't it? I mean, not only the Justice Department was trying to jail you for thinking like this, even though that was standard analysis. You had the big tech platforms censoring you. Heck, we still get throttled and censored over this garbage, raising questions about 2020. We still get censored online. Judicial Watch does. I've been censored repeatedly over the issue. So everyone involved in this should be criminally investigated. And I've observed before, Obama knew, Biden knew, Hillary knew, Clapper knew, Schiff knew, Comey knew, McCabe knew, and of course Obama did it. And no, it's not too late to impeach Obama. They impeached Trump, proceeded with impeachment proceedings against Trump after he was president. They should do the same for Obama. Speaking of corrupt government officials, one of the worst out there is Adam Schiff. Yeah, I got confused because there's so many terrible corrupt politicians. I literally went through 3 or 4 names, and I latched on to Schiff at the end. And he's been subject to a criminal referral for mortgage fraud. It's really quite a simple case. The letter here is, I don't know, do you all have it in the back? Here's the referral, dated May 27th, referring him to the Justice Department for a criminal investigation. He purchased the property in Maryland for $870,000. He entered into a Fannie Mae-backed mortgage agreement with a mortgage company for $610,000 at a rate of 5.625% for a term of 30 years. And he affirmed that that would be his principal residence. And then he reconfirmed that it was his principal residence a few times after that. But at the same time, Schiff took a homeowner tax exemption on a condo he owns in Burbank, California, also claiming that home as his primary residence for a $7,000 reduction off the first 1% property tax. And in 2023, a spokesman for Schiff asserted that Adams' primary residence is Burbank, California, and will remain so when he wins the Senate seat. Primary residence mortgages receive more favorable loan terms, including lower interest rates, than secondary residence mortgages. Essentially, your home, you get the lowest possible interest rate generally available, given your credit score. If you buy a vacation home, you pay extra because that's more than just an added risk having a second home in terms of the point of view of most banks. So you pay a premium. Lenders view secondary residence mortgages as significantly riskier. As a borrower is more likely to continue paying off a primary residence mortgage during any financial hardship. Interest rates on secondary residence mortgages are typically between 0.25% to 0.5% higher than their primary residence counterparts. However, this gap can widen depending on the lender. Mr. Schiff appears to have falsified records in order to receive favorable loan terms and also appears to have been aware of the financial benefits of a primary residence mortgage when compared to a secondary residence mortgage, as a spokesperson in 2023 told the media outlet CNN that his addresses have been listed as a primary residence for loan purposes because they are both occupied throughout the year and to distinguish them from a vacation property. But you can only have one primary residence. So this looks like to be mortgage fraud. And Schiff's response was very peculiar. And I commented on in this video.
The president today is accusing me of fraud, and the basis of his accusation is that I own a home in Maryland and I own a home in California. Big surprise. Members of Congress, almost all of them own more than one home or rent more than one home because we're required to be on both coasts. So he is using my ownership of two homes to make a false claim of mortgage fraud. But what really is going on here is that this is done.
Look, he's dissembling here. It's not about whether he owns two homes. The question is whether he listed both homes in California and Maryland as primary residences. And if he did, it could be a violation of federal law, as is now being pursued by the Trump administration. The fact that he's being so dishonest about this suggests he may have done what he's accused of.
So do you trust Adam Schiff? I don't. He's kind of admitting through omission that he did what he's accused of doing. Maybe a defense available to him, I don't know. But he's got a terrible record on ethics, an abuser, a leaguer, a liar. And I don't use the term liar loosely. I want you to go back and look at all of my, you're not going to go back and do this, but I suspect if you went back and looked at all of my public commentary on government officials, including people that you think I hate or despise because of their evident criminality, I rarely use the term liar. Rarely. Schiff is a liar. Demonstrated 6 ways to Sunday. And so does he deserve the benefit of the doubt on this? No way, Jose. So I don't know what the Trump administration is going to do with this, but this is straightforward violation of law if what they allege is true. So Adam Schiff should be subject to criminal investigation, not only on this, but a whole host of other matters. But, the law is the law here. And when you have senior government officials violating it with seeming impunity, it's especially important that those in responsibility, who have the responsibility to enforce the law, take action to enforce it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.